In this video, I'm going to be talking about selective mutism, so that by the end of the video, you'll know way more about it coming up. Hey, I'm Dan. I have Asperger's syndrome, ADHD, OCD, and dyslexia. I make weekly videos on autism and mental health, so if you're new around here and you want to learn more, remember to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you get notified when I upload videos. Also, if you're watching on Facebook, make sure to give this page a like and a follow so you'll see every video that I upload. So I'm going to be discussing all about selective mutism and everything that you need to know about it, and also I'm going to be talking about some of the symptoms and ways you can spot it and if you have it yourself. But then I'm also going to discuss some of the personal insight that I have as a person who has selective mutism as part of my autism spectrum disorder, and I find that may be valuable to you guys. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Thank you so much for taking the time and choosing that time to join me and hang out and chill out today. I really appreciate that, so thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. At the beginning of every single video, I always read out 3 questions that I've been asked through my Instagram stories. So what you need to do if you want to be featured in a video just like this is head down in the description, click on my Instagram page. So give it a follow and make sure you hit the notifications on for my Instagram. So when I ask you to ask me questions, you'll be able to do that and you may be featured in a video just like this. Okay, so the first question is from HGUNN.2005 and they said, what was the hardest thing about having autism, OCD, and ADHD in school as a teenager? Now, that's a very good question. I find that the hardest part of this was actually relating to my peers and having that, the communication that they, it was hard to communicate socially. It was very difficult, and I feel like anybody on the spectrum will understand how difficult that can be. The next question is from KLS Boswell, and they said, having Asperger's, what is the hardest thing to cope with in day-to-day life? That's a very good question. Do you know what? I think the hardest thing is knowing what people are saying, knowing what people's intentions are. I find this super difficult. I'm not sure if someone's angry, happy, sad, if they're being serious, if they're joking. All this stuff is very difficult to understand. So I'd love to be able to know more about that. And that's a huge daily struggle. The last question here is from Carson Geek, and they said, how do I become as cool as you are on a daily basis? Well, Carson Geek, you already are cool as ever. And that goes for every single person watching the video. Remember how awesome you are. And just keep that there. Keep being awesome, dudes. It's awesome. Okay, so I want to know where you guys are watching from. I'm always super intrigued. Leave me a comment in the comment section right now. Tell me where you're watching from. I am right now here in Wales, North Wales to be precise, in the United Kingdom. So thank you for joining me. Okay, so selective mutism. Let's talk about what it is. So selective mutism is like the inability to socially communicate in social situations where you should be expected to speak. For example, if you're at like a birthday party or you're in a group in school, then people will want you to join in the conversation or be part of a social group that are, putting stories back and forth and putting their input in. Now, selective mutism is where you will have an inability to do that for a number of reasons. There may be 100 causes, but the fact of the matter is that you aren't able to contribute towards that social situation at that time. It's also characterized by the fact that it's not caused by a language barrier. So it's not, it's not that somebody is speaking in Portuguese and then you're speaking in English and then you can't join in the conversation. It is always to do with the fact that you have the inability to talk when you're in a social situation. It's not to do with language, and it should never be confused with a language barrier issue. And it also isn't to do with any profound disability where you won't be able to talk physically or mentally. There's, it's nothing to do with that. It's to do with a deep-rooted social anxiety issue. So the origins of it for manifesting in the fact that you're unable to speak in a party. So for instance, let me give an example. Touching on my personal experience in my life, this is an example of how it is for me. When I am at home or when I'm with my best friend or my cousin, we could talk for hours about music and UFOs and just cool, crazy stuff. And I love talking about the things that I'm really interested in. But then when I go to my girlfriend's parent house where her mum lives and they have parties for people's birthdays and stuff, we're all sitting about and everyone's having this huge discussion and debate, and there's about 8 people there. So there's 8 people versus just 2 people, me and another person. And I just kind of freeze up. I can't talk. I don't know. It almost like drains me. It kind of zaps how, like the way it feels. It kind of just zaps it out of me. I zap the energy to actually talk to anybody, and I'm just unable to do that. And this isn't the first time I've experienced this. I experienced this when I was in college, a technical college here in the UK, which is still high school in America age. And I was around other peers who were kind of like had ADHD and hyperactive as me, but by being around more than 2 or 3 of them, I became like unable to speak in certain situations, and I just felt drained. Like it was it physically drained me. Now, school is one of the most common places that you're going to be able to spot this when say a child starts school. It's thrusting them into a social situation that they have never been in before. And this is very interesting because this brings across a situation that presents itself very social, and if you've never been a social person before, this is going to be something that you're like, oh my goodness, what on earth is going on here? And it could cause social anxiety to show itself. And then also selective mutism. So that's how you can categorize it. But it also can present itself in working environments. It's not to say that just children have it. Let's be very clear here. It's not just a child thing. It could be an older generational thing. It could be something that develops later on in life when you develop an anxiety or a phobia. And again, this comes from the fact that it has a deep-rooted issue. The issue is caused by an intense phobia or fear of social anxiety or social interaction. One of the interesting things as well is that if you have it as a child, a lot of people grow out of having it, which is quite interesting. I didn't really think about this before, but people who've had selective mutism as a kid, as they grow older, they kind of rock out of it a little bit, which is very interesting and fascinating. It also is very notable when it interferes. Okay, so we know that like if you're having issues in social circumstances and social situations, then it's going to be present. Like selective mutism is going to be present in those social situations. Now, another way that it can be present, or you can notice it, is that it interrupts educational functions and vocational functions. And what this means is that, like, if you're in school or in work and you want to communicate to your peers or your teacher or your boss, and you have a huge issue about doing that, then it's going to interfere with that, and it's going to stop you communicating with those people, and it's going to cause upset, and this is going to disrupt your life in a certain fashion. This is very, very interesting because this is one of the diagnostic criteria, which we'll kind of summary of in a few minutes again, but this is one of those criteria. And another way that you can spot the fact that it's selective mutism and not something else is that it's present for at least a month or more. Now, all of these criteria and stuff are taken from the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic criteria for mental health and neurodevelopmental issues. Today's day and age, this is how psychiatrists and neurologists and stuff diagnose certain conditions in people. Having the presence of selective mutism longer than 1 month would rule out any ability for it to be classed as just shyness. Because look, people can be shy and you can like get overly shy with stuff, but if you're completely shy, if you're just shy and you're completely shy, then shyness can kind of go away and you get to warm up to people. But selective mutism definitely needs therapy or a time of longer than 1 month to overcome it. Shyness kind of will go after a month. That's the idea of having that. So the diagnostic criteria for selective mutism is this, and I'll just read these out again, just so we have a summary here. So the first one is failure to talk in social situations where expected. That's number 1. Number 2 is interrupt the educational/vocational functions of your daily life. So again, you find it hard to say, oh, I need help with my work, or I need help with this project in school, or I need to speak to a teacher about my grades, blah, blah, blah. It will, show itself in that fact that you can't do that. You can't communicate to them people because you have that selective mutism. You're mute for that period of time. And then the number 3 is it's present for longer than 1 month. Like I said, if it's longer than 1 month, it's becoming an issue. It's not just shyness, it's an issue. So if you can see those 3 things in order, and those are present in order, then it's definitely selective mutism and not something else. Now, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about selective mutism treatment. So, it's okay, I've got selective mutism, and or someone who's got selective mutism, or you're watching this video and you already have selective mutism, or your kid has it or whatever, and you want to know what treatment's available. So there's a bunch of different treatments available and therapies available for selective mutism. And I've just pulled 3 up here that I've been floating about the internet. And the first one is SCAT, which is a social communication anxiety treatment, which is kind of like the gold standard. I mean, think about it. This specifically targets social anxiety. And as we know from earlier on in the video, selective mutism is a direct result of having social anxiety and it becoming an intense fear or phobia of talking in social situations. So that's kind of like the gold standard. That's the one that everyone says, like, that's the one that you should be taking to do that, which I find very, very interesting. Oh, guys, just to let you know, if you're interested in watching a video on autism or Asperger's syndrome, I'm going to leave a link in the card above here of ways that you can spot autism in people, just so that it may be handy for you if you're watching this video and you're interested in other things that, you know, somebody may have autism. So definitely check that out, and I'll put it on the end card as well. Okay, so the second selective mutism therapy I'll talk about here now is psychodynamic therapy. And this is basically, when it's in children, it's like play therapy. Kids can use play to communicate in a certain way, rather than, like, it's very clinical. If you sit down and ask somebody a question directly, they're going to be like, can you do this for me? Or how do you feel about that? And you may just like tense up and you may freeze and you may not be able to talk. Again, selective mutism kicks in and kicks you in the butt. But if you are using this dynamic therapy, the psychodynamic therapy, it's using play to get kids to then communicate certain things, so that they're playing a character and then they're playing along, and they can then communicate what they want to somebody. And this will help, in turn, help them overcome that fear, that anxiety, that barrier that's stopping them talking in social situations. Now, the third one that I've picked up here as treatment for selective mutism is behavioral therapy. And this is quite interesting. So behavioral therapy is the idea to reward positive behavior. That's basically like the bare principle of it. But the idea is that if you're able to kind of like push through and try and talk a little bit in situations where you may be unable to talk in those situations, like, so say you're I don't know, in a party, or you go with your parents to see a group of family members, and you have the inability to talk, but then you kind of force through a little bit of like nodding and gesturing and maybe saying yes or no, then this behavior is rewarded. You know, if you reward yourself after that behavior, then it will help train your brain to kind of be more open to those situations. It's kind of like it's a very old kind of trick, but it definitely works. And I find this is very good. I mean, positive reinforcement for behavior is always a good thing, but be careful of the therapy that you choose. Make sure that you choose the right one, and that, you know, I'm not telling you to take any of these. I'm saying that, you know, go and look at them if you're wanting to get therapy for, you know, selective mutism. The choice is down to you to check that out. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit in this part of the video about, like, how do I know if I have selective mutism, right? So the interesting thing for me was that I didn't realize I was presenting selective mutism until somebody said it to me. I was doing a video with a girl called Charles Davis who has autism, and we were doing a collaboration video together, and I'll leave that in a card above here if you want to see that. And it was all about, you know, autism in girls. Now, she was talking about selective mutism, and then when we were talking about it, it kind of made me think and reflect, oh my goodness, that's what I do, and that's the things I do. So no one's ever said to me, like, oh, you've got selective mutism because of this. But when you reflect on it, you go, oh my goodness, that's exactly what it is. So now, like, my occupational therapist and my therapist are like, oh yeah, that is selective mutism, but nobody ever figured to point it out to me in the first place. So I found that interesting. So I've written 3 things that to let you know how you can identify selective mutism. Okay, so number 1 is selective mutism is part of social anxiety. Now, if you are suffering from social anxiety, then there is a huge possibility that you could also suffer from selective mutism. Okay, it's going to present itself some way or other, because I feel like it comes part and parcel with social anxiety. And I do believe that anybody who has social anxiety will display some form of selective mutism, and this will be present within them as a person. Okay, so number 2 is selective mutism and autism. So for anybody who doesn't know, autism is a neurological condition that impacts the social and communicative part of a person's brain and how they interact with the world around them, socially and communicatively. Now, people with an autism spectrum condition obviously have social anxiety and anxiety comorbidly in there, as well as OCD and dyslexia and bipolar disorder, depression, stress. All these things are comorbid with an autism spectrum condition. But one of the most interesting things is that selective mutism is commonly associated with an autism spectrum condition. So if you already have an autism spectrum condition and you're experiencing things like I said, like you go to a family gathering or a party and you're not able to join in the conversation, but it's not that lack of trying or not wanting to, you're just, I can't join in this conversation and I'm unable to speak, then it could be down to the fact that you have a selective mutism as part of your autism condition. Okay, so number 3 is selective mutism symptoms. Okay, so some of the symptoms of selective mutism, and I'll just read these out here, which I've kind of made notes for, is overly anxious when talking in social situations that you do not want to talk. Like it's like you're not comfortable talking. You have a fear of talking when you're around those people, and it could be the cause of it could be a number of things. But the fact of the matter is that you can't talk because you have a fear of talking in front of those people. That's a huge symptom. That's like number 1 symptom. Okay, the second one is the inability to talk in a social situation, and you kind of retreat back into yourself. So as you'd be like talking blah 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 with your friend, when you're experiencing selective mutism, you kind of, another symptom is going back into yourself and kind of like closing up a bit and not wanting to talk and not wanting to have that discussion out, because it's something that is just, I don't know, you lose all the energy, you lose all the ability to do that, and it just happens. You have the inability to talk in social situations. Now, I myself have definitely experienced all of these over my time of just looking back and highlighting to myself what's social anxiety, and do I have that, and does that come with selective mutism? And yeah, I've actually experienced those. So I would highly recommend checking out the other video here in my end slate, and definitely check out the videos in the description of this video. So thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Peace.